Hello, and welcome back to Unleash Your Voice. I'm your host, Priya Sam, and I'm so glad you're here today. I want to start today's episode with something that a woman said to me recently that I haven't been able to stop thinking about. So I was on a call with her. She came to my free workshop in June. She has over 2 decades of experience, multiple certifications, a master's degree, an exceptional track record of doing work that stands out. She has done everything right. And she said this to me: I have everything. I have the credentials. I have the experience. I have this. I have that. But how do I emerge above the water? Because right now, the credentials and everything else I have on paper, it's like water and I'm at the surface. But how do I bring myself up? That water metaphor is what I'm still thinking about because it gave me a visual that really describes the situation a lot of people, a lot of the women I speak to find themselves in. You might be one of them. I'm at the surface. Everything I've built is keeping me afloat, but I'm not rising. That's what she was trying to say, right? I'm not being seen. And no matter how hard I work, how many certifications I add, how many committees I join, it feels like nothing is materially changing in how I'm perceived in my organization. Does that resonate with you? Because I hear some version of this all the time. And what gets me every single time is how alone you can feel when you're in this situation, right? You might think it's something you're doing wrong, or you think it's personal, but it's often not you. And also, you're not alone in having this experience. That's why today I want to talk about what I call the invisible struggle, that experience of being genuinely excellent at your job, delivering exceptional impact, and still not being seen the way you need to be seen by the people who make decisions about your career. I want to name it today. Then I'm going to explain why it happens, and I want to show you exactly what it looks like when it ends. So let's get into it. Okay, so first of all, what is the invisible struggle? It looks like this. From the outside, you're successful. You have the senior title, years of experience at respected companies or institutions. You have strong relationships, a reputation for getting things done, maybe even awards or recognition along the way. You have a six-figure or a multi-six-figure salary. Your LinkedIn looks impressive. Your resume checks the boxes. People in your life probably assume you have it all figured out, but on the inside, you feel stuck. You know you're capable of more. You can see the bigger opportunities, the leadership roles, the level of impact you could be making. In fact, you're craving that seat at the table, that ability to be part of more strategic work. You want to be the person who gets tapped on the shoulder and by leadership who want to know, hey, what do you think about this? We need your input on this, right? You want to be that trusted advisor. But when you try to move towards those opportunities, nothing happens. You're not getting tapped for the high visibility projects. You're not being invited into the rooms where decisions get made. You're not being considered for the promotions you know you're ready for. And the worst part is that no one sees the struggle because on paper, you're doing fine. So you feel like you can't really complain, right? You might have other people in your life who say, like, just be grateful for what you have. Why are you worrying so much about, getting ahead? Just relax. And you might smile and nod, but you know you're meant for more. Here's what I know after working with hundreds of women in this exact situation. The invisible struggle is not about your experience. It's not about your credentials. It's not about how hard you work. It's about a gap between the value you are actually delivering every single day and how clearly you are communicating that value to the people who make decisions about your career. I call this the articulation gap. And it's sneaky because it doesn't feel like a communication problem from the inside. It feels like a recognition problem. It feels like other people's failure to see you and your value. And sometimes it is. The systems are imperfect. We know that. Bias is real. Institutions move slowly. But what I've seen over and over again with the women I work with is that there is always something on your side of the equation that you can change. And when you do change it, everything shifts. Let me tell you what that looks like for me. I worked in television for years, first at the local level, then at the national level. And for a long time, I loved it. I loved the storytelling. I loved the fast pace. I loved the work. I loved that every day I had the opportunity to connect with people across the country and make a difference in their lives. It was such a rewarding and fulfilling job. But by the end of my TV career, I was really struggling. I was experiencing discrimination in the workplace. I had toxic bosses and toxic work environments, and it was taking a serious toll on my mental health. I was doing good work. I knew I was doing good work, but I wasn't being seen. I wasn't being valued. And no matter what I contributed, it felt like I was invisible. I'll give you one specific example of what that looked like. I had been working on a morning show. I launched a new segment on that show. It was called Fitness Fridays. It was my idea, my initiative, my execution. And I started to try and use this experience in my networking conversations as I was trying to make connections across the industry and maybe get a job at a bigger station. At this time, I was working at a small station in Eastern Canada. So when I would talk about launching that new Fitness Friday segment, I would describe it like this. I had this idea for a new fitness segment called Fitness Friday. So I pitched it. And when I got the go ahead, I produced it from start to finish by finding studios and guests. I did all the pre interviews. I found compelling stories. And then I hosted the segment. That, my friend, is a task description. It is not a leadership story. What I should have been saying is what I started saying a few months after realizing that was not working. When the leadership at my station shared that one of our business challenges was attracting more viewers in the 18 to 45 range, I started to think about what would interest my friends since I was in that bracket. One of the things I often did with my friends at that time was try new fitness classes on the weekends, and I saw the people around me becoming more health conscious overall. But I realized that on the morning show, we didn't have a recurring segment that really spoke to that audience. So I proposed a new weekly segment called Fitness Friday. I made the business case for why it would resonate and built it from scratch, from guest sourcing to production. I also recommended posting it on social media. It attracted the exact audience my leadership was aiming to expand into. And we also started getting requests from fitness studios to sponsor the segment, creating a new revenue opportunity. How much better is that second story? It positions me as a leader. It shows that I was tying my work to the business goals. It's the exact same experience, but it shows completely different impact. That first version made me sound like a coordinator. That second version shows that I'm someone who creates opportunities to make an impact on the business, and I act on them. That was the articulation gap in my own career, right? I was not articulating my full value in that first version of the story. This is why the language we choose and the stories we share are so important because they help other people understand the value we're bringing. So if you are someone who talks about your tasks, right, people see you as a doer, not a leader. When you talk about your business impact, your ownership, and how you operate and think, they see you as a strategic leader. So for me, when things got really difficult, when the toxic work environment became too much, I made the decision to leave TV entirely. And that's when I pivoted into tech and became a solutions consultant. And again, storytelling set me apart. It helped me to bridge that gap between the newsroom and the boardroom. It's how I was able to make the case for why my skills translated. Those stories helped decision makers see what I was capable of in a completely new context. One example I remember clearly is in my interview for my first solutions consultant role, I was asked, how would you handle being in a boardroom with C-suite executives who are firing unexpected questions at you? And I responded and said, high stress situations are exactly what I'm used to, and I would say the way I can handle them is something that sets me apart, because every day in my TV career, I would get breaking news. So you can imagine I'm on live TV, I have an earpiece, someone is telling me in my ear brand new information while I'm speaking about something else. I have to process that information without letting the people watching me know what's going on behind the scenes. And then I have to smoothly transition and be able to deliver that information in a really clear, concise way. So when you ask me, how do I feel about being in a boardroom where executives are firing unexpected questions at me? I would say that that's exactly the situation that my TV career prepared me for, because I know how to stay calm under pressure and how to respond in a way that is clear and articulate. That landed. They saw the connection, but they didn't see that connection from looking at my resume. I needed to be able to tell the story to bridge the gap. So, this is why storytelling in job interviews, during career transitions, during moments when you're trying to get promoted or recognized for bigger, higher visibility opportunities and roles, that is why your story and the way you tell it is crucial. That pivot and the lessons I learned about how to tell my story changed everything. It's really the reason I do this work today, because I know what it feels like to be in the water, to be at the surface, to have everything, the experience, the drive, the ideas, and to still feel like you're not being seen. And I know exactly how to change that and how good it feels when that change happens. Before I get into what the solution looks like, I want to name the three most common reasons I see women stuck in the invisible struggle, because understanding the root makes the fix so much clearer. Reason number one is that you were told that excellent work speaks for itself. This is the belief that most of us were raised with in school, in our families, in our early careers. Your cultural background might have contributed to this. Put your head down, do great work, be excellent, and the right people will notice you. You don't need to be someone who's loud. You don't need to take up too much space, right? If you're nodding along here, I feel you. And to be fair, that approach works for a while, right? In the early stages of a career, when someone is watching your work closely and evaluating it directly, excellence does get rewarded in entry level roles. But at mid to senior levels, the game changes completely. The people making decisions about your career are no longer watching your day to day work. They are in meetings, they are making strategic decisions, they are stretched. And the way they evaluate you shifts from what you do to how you talk about what you do, from your output to your narrative. And if no one ever told you that, it's not your fault that you're still playing by the old rules, but it is your responsibility, now that you know, to start playing by the new ones. Reason number two, you're listing responsibilities instead of shaping a narrative. This one shows up everywhere, in interviews, in performance reviews, in networking conversations, even in how you introduce yourself at a meeting. It sounds like, I manage a team of 8. I oversee the onboarding process. I handle stakeholder communications. All of those things might be true, but none of them tell me who you are as a leader. None of them tell me how you think, how you operate, what you do differently, or what you've built. What decision makers need, what gets you tapped for opportunities, what gets your name said in rooms you aren't in, is a narrative, a story of your impact, a clear, compelling answer to the question, what sets you apart? And building that narrative is not bragging, it is not embellishing, it is the practice of making your value visible, which I promise you is a skill that anyone can learn. It doesn't matter if you're introverted, extroverted, if you're shy, quiet, if you're someone who likes to be the center of attention. This is a skill that anyone can learn and leverage. Okay, reason number three is that you don't have the language that matches your level. And this is the one that surprises people the most because it's so specific and it's so fixable. At senior levels, there is language that signals leadership. It's not about using big words or sounding impressive. It's about framing your experience at the level of strategy, impact, and judgment rather than task and execution. The difference sounds like this: I coordinated the cross functional campaign versus I led the strategic alignment across 5 teams to ensure the campaign landed on time and at scale. I helped with the change management process versus I designed and implemented a change management framework that got stakeholder buy in across the organization, something 3 previous leaders had tried and failed to do. Same work, different language, completely different perception of your level. When your language doesn't match your level, even the people who want to advocate for you don't have the words to do it. You have to give them that language. You have to make it easy for them to say your name and share your story in the rooms you aren't in. I want to tell you about my client, Michelle, because her story captures this so clearly. When Michelle came to work with me, she was in sales at a tech company. She'd been there for almost 6 years. She had worked her way up and received a few promotions along the way. By any measure, she was a high performer. And then she found out she was being underpaid, that colleagues with the same title and the same amount of experience were making more than her. She was understandably devastated. And when she came to me, she had a theory about why it was happening. She said, I don't think my manager likes me. Why else would you treat me this way? So I started asking her questions. And as we dug in, she had this realization. And it's a moment I won't forget. She said, oh, my manager doesn't see me as underperforming. He just doesn't see me at all. That's the invisible struggle right there in one sentence. And here's what made it even more striking. When I asked Michelle, what do you think people say about you in the rooms you aren't in? Especially, your manager. What does he say about you when your name comes up? She already knew the answer. She'd heard it through the grapevine. She said, oh, I know what he says. He says, Michelle, yeah, she's great. And you might be thinking, well, that's good. But here's the problem. She's great is what you say about almost everyone. Unless they've done something really bad, it doesn't stand out. It doesn't stick. It doesn't make someone think, we need to make sure she's compensated fairly. We need to put her name forward for this opportunity. We need to make sure we keep her. What Michelle needed and what her manager needed was a narrative, something specific, something that would make people say, Michelle is the person we call when we have a difficult client situation. Michelle is the reason that deal came back from the brink. Or Michelle is the one who can walk into a room where trust has been broken and rebuild it. That's the difference between being liked and being seen. So we got to work. We built out Michelle's power story bank, the specific stories that captured her impact in a way that was impossible to overlook. We identified her core themes, the elevated specific language that described how she operated, not just what she did. If you've been to my workshop, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And if you haven't heard of core themes before, think of them as phrases that really capture what sets you apart and that use leadership language. This is the really important part of this. Once we had all of that, we practiced out loud. I made sure that she practiced with me until that language was smooth, natural, and confident. She was able to deliver the stories just like she could talk about her weekend. That's the goal. You want to really internalize your key stories. The shift was remarkable, not just in her interviews and performance conversations, but in how she started to see herself. Once your language finally reflects your value, something changes internally too. You stop waiting to be discovered. You start advocating for yourself with a clarity and a confidence you didn't have before. That is what closing the articulation gap looks like. And by the way, in case you're wondering, for Michelle, this led her to have a career growth conversation with her manager where she shared a presentation that I helped her build. It showcased her impact. She used her new power stories and that leadership language. Her manager actually said after, wow, I had no idea about a lot of this, and I do want to make sure you get the compensation you deserve. Now, at Michelle's company, they had two promotion cycles, beginning of the year and mid-year. And at the time she had this conversation with her manager, they were between those moments. But he said, can you give me this presentation so I can use it in the conversations I need to have? He literally asked her to give him her story. That's all he needed. And through conversations with his leadership and with HR, he was able to get her a 12% raise and a promotion off cycle. That is the power of not just finding your story and using it yourself, but giving it to others to use for you. Because if you're in a moment where you are feeling invisible, you are feeling like you are not being seen for the value you bring, your story is what is going to help you get there. That is what is going to be shared in the rooms you are not in, where decisions about the future of your career are being made. So here's what I want you to take away from today. If you've been feeling like you're at the surface, like you're treading water, right? The credentials are there, the experience is there, the drive is there, but you're still not rising above the surface, I want you to know it is not because you're not good enough. It's not because the right people just haven't noticed yet, and it's not something you have to just wait out. There is a gap between your value and your visibility, and it is something you can close. If you're ready to take action, it starts with getting clear on what sets you apart in language that other people can hear, remember, and repeat. It continues with building the stories that make your impact undeniable. And it deepens with a strategy that puts your name in the right rooms, even when you're not in them. And you don't have to figure this out alone. If this episode resonated, if you found yourself thinking, this is me, this is exactly what I've been experiencing, I'd love to have a conversation with you. The best place to start is with my free elite communication formula. The link to grab that is in the show notes. And if you're thinking already, hey, this is something I need to work on, I need help and support with this, then I would invite you to book a free career accelerator call with me. In 45 minutes, I will help you to uncover your biggest communication gap, what is holding you back, and the 3 things that will help you to reach your next career milestone. If you're ready for that call, then find me on Instagram or on LinkedIn and DM me call, and we will get set up with a time to connect. If you've listened to this episode and you thought, hey, this person in my life really needs to hear this, maybe someone who's working really hard and still feeling invisible, please share this episode with her because she deserves to be seen too. Thanks for joining today. I will see you next week. And until then, remember, your story is the one thing you have that no one else has. I'll see you next week.